Hello everyone, I am back with another video. It's been a while since my last one. I think I did it back in August, so I can't do the math in my head right now, but many months ago. And so I am back, and I will briefly explain why I've been absent. Um, this past fall, I graduated uh, with my degree in mechanical engineering. I also got a minor in mathematics. Um, and the whole fall I was working on my capstone, my senior design project, and that took up a lot of time. It was very stressful, especially towards the end when I had my report and my presentation and all of that. And so now that's over, and I now have time to make videos again. So that's why I've been gone since August. And today, the video I'm coming to you with is I wanted to discuss some of the books I think I'll be reading in 2022. I don't know for sure if I'll be reading them, but they are all books. They're specific books and specific subjects that interest me greatly right now, and so I figured why not discuss them. So, uh, so I should probably preface this. There's a lot of books here. I also want to mention these are not the only books I plan on reading, these two stacks. I'm interested in many different subject areas. I've, in 2021, I discovered many different other areas of reading that I previously did not know that I was interested in. So I've pulled a selection from all these different subject areas, and I'll discuss them each. So it's around two each. These different subject areas. So again, want to clarify, not all the books I'll be reading this year, but I definitely will probably read these books this year. I've become very interested in nonfiction. I've been reading a lot of nonfiction towards the end of 2021, a lot of it, and so a lot of the books here are nonfiction, many different areas of nonfiction with some fiction as well. So in the realm of nonfiction, the first type of nonfiction book that I will be reading is biography. And so the first biography I have here is Cleopatra by Stacy Schiff. I am very much interested in Cleopatra's time period because she inherited a throne that had been standing for thousands of years, and at the same time she's dealing with this rising power in the Mediterranean. It's not even rising at this point. It's fully established. The Roman Empire. It's almost 700 years old at this point, and she's dealing with historical figures like Mark Antony and Julius Caesar and Augustus, and I'm fascinated by that. Her dealing with the viper's nest that was her domain in Egypt, as well as these Romans. And I want to dive deep into the all the facts surrounding her that we know of, the very little that we know of, and just learn what I can. And I'm really fascinated by this area. So this will be one of the first reads I do in 2022. So the second biography is technically not wholly biography. It is also a critical study. And so this book is Christopher Marlowe, A Biographical and Critical Study by Frederick S. Boas. I hope I'm not pronouncing that wrong. And why do I want to read this book? Well, I'm fascinated by Marlowe. There's sort of like in the case of Cleopatra, to my understanding, there's very little we know of definitively about his life. Maybe it's a stupid idea to compare Cleopatra to Christopher Marlowe. Very different figures, but you get what I'm trying to say, where Marlowe's life, for those who are familiar, there's a lot of mystery there. The circumstances of his death were a mystery. He might have been a spy. And, he died at 29, and he wrote very famous plays by that point, and he died young, and he's also an exact contemporary of William Shakespeare, and certainly influenced him, to my understanding as well. And this book is apparently the definitive book about everything Marlowe, everything we know of, and a great examination of his work. And I believe this is also out of print, so I had to go search for this on the internet, and I got a good ex-library copy. So this year I'll be diving deep into Marlowe, his plays. I have his plays here. I also have his the complete poems and translations. He translated poets like Ovid, and so I will be spending a lot of time with Marlowe this year and getting to know him very well. So, or to the best of my ability. So, yeah. So that's the first realm of nonfiction. So going to fiction now. The first book is George Eliot's Middlemarch. Very famous book. I do not need to introduce the author or the work, but why am I reading this? Twofold, to my understanding, I think. There may be more reasons, but they don't come to mind right now. First is I do not find the Victorians fascinating or interesting. I don't find the Victorians interesting, and I want to say that with an asterisk because that comment comes from a place of ignorance because I have read so little of the Victorians. I just, for whatever reason, if I had the option to read a Victorian author or some other subject, I can't think of anything that comes to mind right now, but I'd rather read the other subject because I just don't. I don't feel any intrigue towards the Victorians. So, I hope this book changes that because there's, to my understanding, I'm probably going to say to my understanding a lot in this video. I'm beginning to think. The Victorian era produced some of the greatest literature that we know that has been done yet. That's a weird way of phrasing it, but you know what I mean. There is so much great Victorian literature, and I figured why not start with Middlemarch. And I think depending on my reaction to this book, which I feel inclined to say will be overwhelmingly positive, I'll be much more interested in the Victorians, and then I'll actually come to understand them and read more of their the literature of that time period. And I look forward to that. And I look forward to reading this because I know George Eliot is an absolute titan of literature, and it's a shame that I have not gotten to her yet. So, Middlemarch. So, this second book, well, I should preface this. I have read from this author. This author I'm about to introduce. I read his first book earlier this year. This is William Gaddis. He wrote the Recognitions. I actually have it right here. He wrote the Recognitions and he published it in 1955. And I read it in June of this year. And it took me a month. And it was the most difficult challenge in my life as a reader. Going into that book, I had read the Iliad, the Odyssey. I didn't read the Odyssey. I read the Iliad, hadn't read the Odyssey yet, but I read War and Peace, Moby Dick, Don Quixote. I mean, I felt at that point, yeah, I'm a strong reader. I'm not scared of any book. And then I read that book. I read it. I read every word. I don't know if I definitely did not get everything that book has to offer in the first go, but it was very difficult for me. And it wasn't difficult for the sake of being difficult. It was difficult because the story demanded it, at least to my understanding. William Gaddis was the writing served the story, and the story was very complex. And I loved it, but I was like mystified by it. I was like, how is this? I was reading it. I'm just thinking to myself, how is this possible? How did he do this? So anyway, not to go at length about the Recognitions, but I am going to read, or I plan to read, his second book. That is J.R. And J.R. was written 20 years after the Recognitions, and so 1975, it won the National Book Award. And this book is, if I'm not mistaken, there's no chapter breaks. It has, I believe, over 120 characters, and it is written almost exclusively in unattributed dialogue. So this book is going to be difficult. And it's no wonder why it took Gaddis 20 years to complete. So this will be a challenging read this year, and I imagine I'll get around to it. So the next nonfiction area is science. The first book I want to read is The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas S. Kuhn, I think. And this book is very influential. I think it's just one of the most influential books ever published. And in this book, I believe the author puts down, he basically states, like, science is not always this natural progression, always advancing, but it's a buildup of data. And eventually there's just a complete tidal wave that comes out of nowhere that changes the paradigm, I guess. So, a revolution, basically, the structure of scientific revolution. So, very much excited to read this and learn everything it has to offer. So, yeah, that's a read I'm very excited to dive into. So this next book technically isn't science. I'm cheating a little bit. It's not hard science, but it involves a scientific discipline. That is archaeology, and the discipline is archaeology. And this book is Eyewitness to Discovery, 50 first-person accounts of more than 50 of the world's greatest archaeological discoveries. I would consider myself somewhat of a lay archaeologist. I love reading about archaeology, and I love reading about the great discoveries. And so I got this book such that I could live vicariously through the people who discovered these monumental archaeological sites. So this is going to be a book I'm just going to revel in. I cannot wait to read it all. So I have the next book. This is just one book in this section. That's poetry. I plan on reading a lot of poetry this year, but I wanted to single this work out. And it's a poem that I've read before. I already mentioned it earlier in this video. And the poem is the Iliad, but this is a specific translation of the Iliad. This is the Alexander Pope translation. This is published by Penguin Classics. Huge volume. And Pope translated the Iliad into rhyming couplets, which is an interesting choice because the original Iliad, the meter is, or the rhyme meter is dactylic hexameter. I don't know the right terms for the poetry for it, but I know that translating Homer into rhyming couplets was a bold move. And to my understanding, Alexander Pope could rhyme like no other person in the English language. So if anyone were to translate Homer into rhyming couplets, it would be Alexander Pope. And there's actually a funny thing I remember reading. I read it somewhere earlier this year. But it was... so upon Alexander Pope publishing this, someone had given him a review of it, or had sent him something, or said something to him that basically said, regarding this translation, "It's a very pretty poem, Mr. Pope, but you mustn't call it Homer." So there are a great deal of critics about regarding this translation, at least in the past. I don't know if there are any critics now, but there's a lot more Alexander Pope here than there is Homer. It's about the same subject matter, but a far cry away from the actual Homeric Greek. But I know the story, and I read the Robert Fagel's translation, and so I have I would say a strong familiarity with the subject matter and the scheme of the poem, and so I feel I am now ready to see someone else's take on the Iliad. So really looking forward to reading this. This will take me a long time. It will take me a long time. So that is the Iliad. So the next realm of nonfiction I want to read is regarding politics. So politics is I want to be informed. I want to know the political history, the origins of ideas of nations, and where these ideas come from and how they've evolved. And so I've singled out two very influential books to read this year. So the first book is Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. And there's also in this volume 2 essays on America, this Penguin Classics volume. And hopefully I'm going off my memory here. I might be misremembering something, but de Tocqueville was sent by France to America to observe the implementation of democracy, and this is shortly after the fall of Napoleon. So France had gone through serious is an understatement, serious political upheaval in their country, and de Tocqueville was sent to America to observe democracy in action and seeing what could be brought back to France and what could be utilized and what are the strengths and weaknesses and everything in between. And so de Tocqueville went to America and wrote down everything he saw and saw democracy in action. And that's what this book is about. Hopefully I didn't butcher that description of the book, but I feel as an American I have a duty to read this book and to understand it, and so as a citizen, so I will read this year, and that will be that. So cool. So the next book is a big one. This is a classic of the 20th century. De Tocqueville is a classic of the 19th century. So this is The Origins of Totalitarianism by Hannah Arendt. I think it's Hannah Arendt. I don't think it's Hannah Arendt. I think it's Hannah Arendt. The Origins of Totalitarianism. And I don't think this book needs any introduction. Just like, Democracy in America needs no introduction, but this book doesn't either. And it's right there in the title, The Origins of Totalitarianism. So I'm going to read this year. And I can already tell that this is going to take me a long time to really digest. I'll probably have to read only a few pages every day with my pen in hand. And, after those 5 or 10 pages are over, I'll just, walk away and mull it over. So, but I can't wait. I've yet to read any of Hannah Arendt's books. But I actually have 2 more of them here. I have Eichmann in Jerusalem and On Revolution. And I'll probably read those 2 this year if I successfully get through The Origins of Totalitarianism. I genuinely can't. That's one of the reads I'm most excited for. So the next area of nonfiction, technically, is something that I've really come to appreciate in the past year. This year I've been reading a lot of works from classical antiquity. So, as someone who does not have Greek, but is currently working on Latin, teaching myself, I am entirely working with translation. I am dealing with translators taking Greek and Latin and putting it in English. And because of that, I've become fascinated with translation. How someone could awfully translate one work and then another translator translate it and miss nothing. Just that spectrum of success when it comes to translation. And so I want to better understand the process of translation and the relationships between languages, and come to appreciate what the English language is doing, because I've read up a lot about what Latin does, how you can hold out a sentence for pages, and you don't know exactly what the sentence means until you reach the end of the sentence where the verb is there. The most famous utilizers of this strategy, to my understanding, is Cicero and Livy, where you have these long, glorious sentences that just sprawled for pages and for great lengths of time, and then has a zinger at the end. The verb comes and sends a shockwave backwards through the sentence, where you finally see what the sentence means in its entirety. That's a very vague explanation of Latin, but I'm sure most of you will understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, the first book I'm going to read and study, and it's going to take me a long time, is After Babel, Aspects of Language and Translation by George Steiner. George Steiner is one of the towering critics of the 20th century, and I've not read a whole lot of him, but everything I've read, I've really resonated with, and I've learned quite a bit from him. And so seeing him take on translation and language is just like the ultimate combination for me. So I'm really going to enjoy reading this. Keeping up with language, this second book is essentially just a biography of Latin as a language. And as I'm learning Latin now, I want to learn the history of the language, and not just the classical Latin of Caesar and Cicero, but also how it evolved through the Middle Ages, and eventually when you get to the Renaissance with writers like Petrarch and Erasmus writing in Latin. So it will be a nice complement to read this book along with my Latin study. The next two books are just general histories. And the first book this is a big volume, and it's actually technically two works. The History of the Conquest of Mexico and the History of the Conquest of Peru by William H. Prescott. Check out this book. This is huge. And how many pages is this? So it's about 1,230 pages, it looks like. So why am I reading this? When I was in high school, in my history classes, I did not really pay attention much, but I think in my sophomore or junior year, when I got to the Age of Exploration, the so-called Age of Exploration, the conquistadors, I became very interested for whatever reason. I loved reading about them. I don't want to, not like, I found them interesting, but I found reading about them to be, the actual subject matter to be horrifying. So I'm going to read this book, and I want to read all the history we have of the conquistadors, the Spanish colonialism, and also to accompany this, once I finish this book, I also want to read some of the primary sources we have from that time period. The first one would be The Conquest of New Spain by Bernal Diaz. I actually own a copy. Where did I put it? Oh, right here. So it looks like this. Bernal Diaz, the Conquest of New Spain. So this Bernal Diaz was a conquistador who worked in the service of Hernan Cortez. So he was there as a first-person eyewitness of the events of, the betrayal of Montezuma and the infiltration of the Aztecs and the eventual, basically, destruction of the empire. Just absolutely horrific to read about, but still intensely interesting. So I'll eventually read this after I read the Conquest of New Spain. The second book is a short account of the destruction of the Indies by Bartolomé de las Casas. It was written in 1542, and Bartolomé de las Casas was on one of Columbus's voyages and had seen firsthand the horrific treatment of the indigenous peoples encountered by the conquistadors and all the explorers. And he hated it. And he was a fierce defender of the indigenous populations. And so he wrote the book in 1542 and dedicated it to Philip II. And basically told Spain what the heck is going on down here in the New World. So I want to read that source. And then the final source is the Chronicle of the Narvaez Expedition by Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, which is an account of shipwrecked conquistadors landing in Florida, and they were there to claim the the southern parts of what is now the United States, to my understanding. And the expedition is them going by foot from Florida through Texas to California, and all the indigenous, the Native Americans they encounter on the way there, and the geographical struggles, and all those factors are in that book. And it's told, the author was a Spanish nobleman who was like the treasurer of the expedition, a treasure seeker. So, yeah, that's one of the other primary sources from that time period that I want to read. And that will accompany me following reading this. So, and then the final book I have here is The Discovery of India. I don't know exactly how to pronounce the author's full name, but this is a very famous book. This is now, I think, believed to be considered a 20th century classic. Why am I reading this? I'm reading this because I know very little about Indian culture and history. I hate to say it, but I do know very little. And I want to change that because India has a rich cultural history and rich culture and history. And so, I want to learn I want to learn all I can about it. And I also want to read at some point, probably not happening this year, but eventually, is the Mahabharata, one of the founding myths of India, and I really want to read that because I know people who have read it and are also currently reading it, and just what I hear is just amazing about it. And so I want to just get a broad scope view of the Indian culture, and then go to the Mahabharata. So that's that. That's some of the books I want to read this year. Just tiny selections from the various different areas I'm interested in. And I should also clarify, I am also going to be reading extensively this year into antiquity. I have finished Herodotus. I read Suetonius. I'm going to be wrapping up Cassius Dio, at least the Dio that's been published by Penguin Classics in English. It's not the whole work. But I also have to go through the rest of the Greek historians like Thucydides, Xenophon, Polybius, and then I want to get to Tacitus, and I still have to read Julius Caesar. I want to read the later Roman Empire with the Ammianus Marcellinus. I want to read Gibbon. There's a whole lot I want to read. I'm all over the map, and so that's sort of what my 2022 is going to look like vaguely. The various areas of interest I have, and the type of books I'll be reading. So I just wanted to share that with you. Let me know if you're reading any similar books this year, or if you have, or you have any recommendations in this area, in history or archaeology or linguistics. I'd very much like to hear any recommendations. Specifically in the realm of translation. I've done research into the realm of translation, but I've found very little that outside of like textbooks that sounded interesting. So if there's anything out there that you would recommend, I'd love to know. And so yeah, I will be making more videos. I don't know when they'd be released. I'm not like sticking to a schedule, but I know I am currently working on a video for Herodotus. And I'm putting a lot of work into it because I've read a lot about Herodotus and the Greek Bronze Age, and also Greece right before Periclean Athens and the Peloponnesian War. So I'm working on that. I'm also doing a video on Homer because I just recently finished the Odyssey, so I've read all of Homer now, and I'm going to be reading Hesiod and all this stuff. So I'm planning videos on Homer and Herodotus. You could probably expect a lot of classical antiquity videos this year because I'll be reading a lot. I'm also planning on doing a video with my friend and fellow booktuber Matt from Matt's Bookshelf. We will be discussing Suetonius, and we'll be making 2 or maybe even 3 videos on it about the Judo-Claudian dynasty and the Flavian emperors and all that. So those are what's coming relatively soon. Don't know exactly when, but it's being worked on. So that's that. I am glad to speak again to you all, and I look forward to reading your comments. And 2020, let 2022 be another great reading year for us all. So, all right, I'll see you in the next video.